Hey investors, welcome to another Investors Therapy session. What are Investors Therapy sessions? For each session, I'll interview a guest that has a unique life experience that we can learn from to help us become better investors and thinkers. Today, I'm sharing part 2 of my interview with Chip. The second part of the interview covers how to prepare yourself for retirement, the complications that can arise during retirement, how to think about replacing your salary, finding meaning outside of work, how mega backdoor Roths work, understanding multi-generational wealth, and how to teach your kids how to properly manage their inheritance, and much more. But before we get started, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to this session and head over to svinvestorsclub.com. That's svinvestorsclub.com, where you can join our investment community, which is dedicated to helping current and former tech employees learn about investing. Inside the group, you'll gain access to our group discussions, daily investment articles, and you'll have an opportunity to join us at our in-person meetups. Also, you'll gain access to my free Real Estate Investors Toolbox, which includes a real estate investment calculator and questions you can use to interview real estate professionals such as real estate agents, property managers, real estate lawyers, and CPAs. And inside the toolbox, it includes a link to my referral generator that can match you with the real estate pros to help you with your investment journey. So make sure to head over to svinvestorsclub.com and join our community. Now let's get to the episode. So I want to go into retirement. So I want to talk about what were your feelings leading up to retirement? It's a big milestone. What was going through your mind financially and everything else like that?
Yeah. I think the key thing for me financially was just looking at income replacement. Can I replace my income from working? And I didn't retire until I felt that the answer to that was yes, and had a pretty clear picture in mind of how that was going to work, and also what are some fallback positions that I have if certain things don't go as planned. What are some areas where I could cut expenses or increase income or things like that if things don't go well. So that was really the first thing, is just looking at income replacement. As far as the shift out of the regular workday life, I think a lot of people really miss that and don't like to leave their jobs for that reason. I loved my work. I felt I was working on the coolest products ever. I was working on Google Earth, was my last project. Before that, I've worked on Google My Maps and on Google Maps, and just stuff I love. I love the things I've done there. Street View, worked on Street View. So these were absolutely the most interesting projects of my entire career. On the other hand, I think my amount of enthusiasm was waning. It's like, yes, they're the greatest projects ever, but I kind of want to do something else. And so I was just a little bit tired of it. The commute into work, if you're fixing bugs as an engineer, you kind of get the same. The bugs are always different, but they're also kind of the same. And yeah, I'm going to fix another bug and da 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 da. So it becomes a little bit repetitious in that sense. Also, honestly, my enthusiasm for the investing is quite high. Not just stock market investing, which I've done all my life, and we haven't talked very much about it. But also the real estate investing. I find the commercial stuff fascinating, and for me, there's still a huge amount to learn. Anyone who's really knowledgeable in commercial investing, who hears me talk about it, will be saying, "Oh my God, he has a lot to learn." I know I do, but it's also working well for me right now. And I feel like there's a lot more that can be done. I'm still relatively young, so to speak, in the overall scheme of things. I'm 65. So there's options to do more. I might get into syndication. I've toyed with the idea. uh, we'll see. I'm not there yet, but now I have more time to think about it. So this is something where, while I was working at Google, there's so little time to even think about some of these nuances. Now, even though my days are still pretty busy, but if I want to think about syndication, I can do that. I have the luxury to explore that type of thing.
Right. So those are a lot of good points you made, and I wanted to talk about meaning in the aspect of retirement. A lot of people focus on that financial number. I know some financial planners just say, look at your post-retirement salary, times it by 75%, and that's what you're going to need in retirement. And they just leave it at that. But there's been studies showing that when you take someone out of a work environment, they lose their sense of meaning and they connectedness, and they feel like they're kind of like aloof. So it seems like real estate is giving you meaning and is making you feel connected or whatnot. Is that one anchor of how you're going to help navigate retirement?
Yeah, it's a good question, but I would not say that it's giving my life
Mm-hmm.
meaning, any more than really by the time I retired, my work wasn't giving my life meaning either. It was certainly a big part of my identity.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. And if you're sitting at a bar and you tell the person next to you, "Oh yeah, I work on Google Earth," that's a great conversation starter. Uh, as opposed to, I used to be a compiler engineer. If I say, "Oh yeah, I manage the C++ compiler," they'd go, "I don't care. What's that?" So this was cool, and I found meaning in it, I suppose. But more more meaningful for me would be my family. Still my wife, my kids, even my ex-wife. I still get along well with. All these people are important in my life, um, and really a lot more important than my work or my investing. I look at the investing as primarily as a means to an end. It's a way of generating income. It also, the types of investing I do happen to be things that I enjoy. So I enjoy stock market investing. I enjoy real estate. I enjoy commercial real estate investing a lot more than I enjoyed having a residential rental. That's just me,
Mm-hmm.
but that's the commercial stuff. There's always something going on because your tenants are doing things. Sometimes they're changing out. They're developing their businesses, and you can do things to help them to make their business more successful, even if it's just keeping the place clean or putting extra trash receptacles out. This is a good feeling. I enjoy it. But does it give my life meaning? I wouldn't say that. In the kind of spiritual sense that I think is more important to consider. Um, I photography is one of my hobbies,
Mm-hmm.
and but again, I'm not sure it gives my life meaning.
That makes sense.
It's something I do that I enjoy, that I'm pretty good at. Um, there are other hobbies I've had that I'm not very good at, but still enjoy. I used to do quite a bit of ceramics. I'd like to get back to it.
Yeah,
I throw the world's worst pots, but they're still fun. I enjoy it,
that's cool.
and and our cats eat out of some pots that I've thrown, so that's good. I get to see it. I
Nice.
suppose that brings meaning to that
Right.
aspect.
I guess yeah. I guess I should have rephrased. Well, keeps you active and going because I think there's this big fire movement people are talking about, and they say, okay, I'll hit my number, and then I'm just going to hang out. But you need something to keep you going. It's something to do, something to drive you.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think because what is that? I don't think people really want to just sit around and watch TV or,
Hmm.
or play computer games. Some do, I suppose, but there's so much else. I like hiking. I'd like to do more of it. I like doing road trips. I'd like to do more of that within reason. Um, I, I like. Uh, I guess what I like isn't really important, but the key thing is just to have things that you like
Right.
and that you enjoy spending time in. I mean, it could be going and bouncing your grandchild on your knee.
Hmm.
Maybe that's what you like. and or helping your kids paint the house or something like that.
Yeah.
These are all good
Because I think
things.
sometimes the hobbies can go to the wayside when we get so busy with work and our investments and what else we're doing. So it's always good to reconnect with those things. Now,
Yeah, I'm always busy and I'm never bored. So, and that's for years. I can remember being bored. I think the last time was like 1965 or something.
yeah, I remember the elementary
So,
school days, just watching that clock and just like, oh my God, when is this going to end? What I want to get into is what are some uh, retirement complications you might have ran into, on the financial things or things
oh,
you didn't expect with like maybe dealing with like Medicare and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, okay. No, this is a hot button
Mm-hmm.
for me. So, the transition of the health insurance is absolutely the most absurdly painful process you can imagine. I'm just stunned by how poorly this works. And you know what? Medicare is not the worst of it. It took me a long time to understand Medicare and Part A, Part B, Part C, Medicare supplemental, prescription drug, da 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 da. Plan A, Plan B, Plan F, da da da. But you can understand it, and the material is all out there, and it actually works pretty smoothly. So I'm 65, so actually I just turned 66. So when I left Google, I was able to go right on to Medicare. However, my wife is younger. Uh, my wife is not 65, and so she can't go on Medicare. This has got to be a very common situation. And there are different ways to handle it. You can switch to some private insurance, but actually Google's Cobra rates are quite reasonable because the employee population is so low. So your typical Cobra medical, if you're coming out of Google, is like roughly $750 a month, which seems like a lot, but compared to what you'd pay in a lot of other plans, it's not bad. So we wanted her to go on to Cobra, and you can do that because I'm going on to Medicare. Okay, not only do the forms to do this don't allow you to actually specify that. You have to call up the WageWorks customer service, and they explain, okay, yeah, the form doesn't represent it, but you just do this and this, and it'll all work out. So you do this and this, great. Then they wound up setting up separate accounts, and my payments were going into one account, but the billing was coming out of the second account. So then her insurance is canceled for non-payment. Then more customer service, go around. Okay, we've reinstated it, and we've merged the accounts, and we've transferred the automatic billing. Next thing we find out, oh, it's canceled again. Why? Oh, because the automatic billing, even though we told you it was transferred, actually wasn't. So, okay, this is the kind of thing, it's mundane, it's boring, but I have spent hours on this. And I have one piece of advice to anybody doing this, which is, first of all, keep careful notes of everything and who you talk to. Um, it's absolutely critical to success. And the other is get started on it early. Um, it Even if you get started on it early, it's still a good chance you're going to get screwed in some way. So just pay attention. Don't let things slide. Know who you need to talk to, and act quickly. And yeah, so the medical has been absolutely the worst part of this transition. Um, it is not a well-oiled process. Much of the burden falls on people like WageWorks. And I'll just say, since I mentioned their name, everybody I've talked to there has been great. I have absolutely no complaints about any of their customer service people. The problem is that their system is not set up to do this.
Mm-hmm.
That means each representative is kind of trying to invent how to make it work. They understand what I want to do. They understand that it's okay. Their system does not make it easy for them, and that leads to fail. It's a process failure
Right.
at that point.
And this is definitely good stuff for us to know because we all think, oh, we retire and we just go on Medicare and happily ever after. It's like, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no, no. It continues
Well,
the pain.
I have to say, people complain about Medicare a lot, but it's working well for me so far.
Right.
And I think it's good to take the time to understand it. It's fine if you want to just go to an advisor and they'll explain it to you and boil down your choices for you. I am an engineer, so I like to understand how it works.
Right.
But it's probably not essential.
Good to know that you have, but just the fact of taking notes while you're speaking to customer service, because I'm sure you've gone through a lot of escalations and not everyone has context what's going on. You got to keep those logs and don't expect
Logs are key.
Don't expect them to know exactly what's going on. So that's really good advice.
I have a couple other pieces of retirement advice. One is if you're planning on doing, some of this is kind of obvious. If you're planning on doing any refinancings or any major financing, get it done before you retire. It's kind of obvious when you think about it, but your financials, first of all, it doesn't say you're going to retire. If maybe you're planning on retiring in July, if you're getting a loan in April, there's nothing in there that says, oh, and I'm retiring in July. So they're looking at your income, and that income is what's figured in when they're processing the loan. And so you want to do that while you still have that income. It makes your income ratio look a lot better. So just do that. The other thing is, if you're thinking about retirement, again, this is not rocket science, but just think about the timing of certain events at work. So the most obvious one that I think everybody thinks about is annual bonus. Different companies do it different ways. So you probably want to, if you're thinking of retiring, towards the end of a year, you probably want to at least stick around till January and get your annual bonus. The other one is your 401k. One of the best things, and it's probably mostly out of scope for this discussion, but is to front load your 401k contributions to the first half of the year. A lot of people do that. This is where you're making big 401k contributions early on, and then you're done with it. Let's say sometime before June, instead of having the 401k contributions run out through the year. In fact, a lot of people will take their annual bonus and it'll all go to the 401k.
Yeah.
So the point there is, if you're planning on retirement, front load your 401k contributions for that year so that you max out your 401k before you leave the company, because you can't contribute after you're gone.
Right now, those are really good points. And it sounds like you had regular 401k. Did you also do like pre-tax and also Roth? Did you look for tax diversity in your holdings?
Yeah. I did the so-called mega backdoor, which is just it's like free money. Well, it isn't free money, but it's just such a good idea. I can still remember when the engineer sitting next to me, we were working on my maps, and he was telling me about this mega backdoor thing, and I went, "No way, you can't do that." I looked at it and I went, "Oh my gosh, you can do this!" And so the laugh was really on me, but so I've been doing that ever since.
You owe him now 10% of your retirement. Let's talk about the mega backdoor. So it's basically you can, let's say the IRS limit always increases, but you can do about 26,000 that usually gets matched by your company, depending upon where you work. And then you have an additional 27 or whatnot that you can put through a mega backdoor.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I've forgotten all the details of the law. I have looked into it, but basically you can make a total contribution of it's about 53 or 55,000, and that might be if you're making the extra contributions that you get when you're over 50, but anyway, it's in the mid 50,000s. But your pre-tax portion of that is only, as you said, it's in the low 20s, I believe, and that includes the company match. But the rest of it, you can actually continue to contribute, and it depends on the company's plan. A lot of companies allow it. Google does allow it. I think a lot of other tech companies do, but not everybody's company does.
Right.
And then because it's because it's after-tax dollars, you can leave it in your after-tax 401k, or you can roll it into a Roth. And I would roll mine into the Roth. I think probably most of us do.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm not sure that's a huge advantage over just leaving it in after-tax 401k, but uh,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Now, we didn't go into have you ever used a self-directed IRA for any of your real estate investments?
Great question. No, I have not.
Okay.
I've considered it.
Okay.
Have you?
Yeah, I'm actually in the point where I'm trying to do it with angel investments. So basically, what I do is I have my Roth IRA, and I would move that over into a self-directed IRA that would allow me to then have a checkbook, and I could start investing in angel investments directly, and then all of the any of the capital gains or taxes from those investments would be treated like a standard like Roth IRA, where then I would not have to pay on the gains once I hit retirement age. So you can do that, or you can invest in real estate, or you can go into other investments. But the only problem though is when you do the self-directed route, the fees are very high. So some providers, you're going to pay, you'll get nickel and dime on little exchanges, but then you have to pay like a monthly fee of 300, $400 per year. So you probably want to have a significant amount of capital in there to justify what you're doing. And so from my point of view, and I'm not a CPA or I'm not a financial planner, so speak to your financial planner, but being that I'm investing in angel, which is high risk, if I can get orders of magnitude return on my investments, I feel that it will justify the expenses.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've been concerned about the fees
Yeah.
from what little research I've done on it. I don't like fees. Fees just eat into your returns, of course. But you're right. If your aggregate amount is large enough, then the fees become a small percentage. The other thing is I like to look at my retirement accounts uh, basically as my cushion. So I tend to keep them in lower risk
Mm-hmm.
assets, and I'll do my riskier investment with uh, non-retirement funds, personal funds. Um, and that also means if when I go to take a capital loss, that means I can actually recognize the loss from a tax standpoint and use it to offset my income. Whereas if it's in a retirement account, a capital loss is just a capital loss. There's no tax angle to it. I just to me, I hate taking a loss, but when I think about, oh, but I get a tax deduction for it, it always makes me feel better.
Mm.
And I use that as an emotional tool to kind of flip it around and say, oh, look at this loss I can realize. It's like fruit on a tree waiting for me to pluck it. And I say, oh, I've got this wonderful loss I can take and use it to offset my gains. I mean, in actuality, no loss is better.
Right.
But if you have it, take it. I don't know. I mean, have you looked into like what happens when you have a loss in your retirement? It's just a loss.
Right. That's a really, really good point. I actually need to research that more, just think to look into. So what I was doing was in my Roth, I was doing some trading on some stocks, and I was able to about half of it is the capital I put in, the other half is returns and cash. It's all liquid.
Nice.
So I said, okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to use some of the winnings to then roll into some of the angel investing. But I haven't even thought about the write-off component. So you've given me some homework to think about. So so thank you on that level. I really appreciate that.
Oh, it's all fun.
Yeah.
I like the idea of being able to tap those funds
Yep.
for something more interesting.
Right.
And I've seen people. I've occasionally run into property that I was interested in where the owner was somebody's IRA,
Mhm.
and so people do it.
Yep. Yeah, I know one of my friends' family, they invest in multifamily properties and they use their self-directed 401ks to do that, and it's worked out really well for them. I wanted to ask you, now you have all these investments, and well, let's take a couple steps back. You started with your family story and the farm, and then that led to you then using that money to now go into different types of investments. We talked about the commercial aspect, and another conversation we might go into syndication. And so now you're doing your investments. What does this mean for your family? Like, when you get to the point where you say, "Hey, I might want to take a step back from real estate," have you thought about what your exit's going to be in that level?
Yeah, I have thought about that. My goal and my plan really is to educate my kids as to how these businesses operate. And the commercial property really is it's a business. I mean, I feel like I'm operating a business, and the business has key people. It has our property manager, has the leasing agent, and I didn't even talk about the importance of good legal advice, but that's also a factor, especially when you're negotiating leases. A a good attorney can be a huge help, uh, and I highly recommend it. Um, so my thought is that they have something that they'll inherit collectively, unless I sell it all. I don't know, but I don't like realizing gains, so there's apt to be some assets, unless I need the money, and this can happen. Anything can happen in the future. Um, but my intention is to give them some tools so that they could continue to operate it if they choose to do so, get the income from it, um, exchange it, sell it, whatever makes the most sense to them at the time. Um, I'm not planning to necessarily sell it off by such and such a date. And exhausting the capital in there is not part of my retirement plan. My retirement plan basically involves living off the income, not consuming the capital.
Beautiful.
Good. I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope it works out well.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate in that we had this farm. It was an asset that I didn't buy, I didn't create. Uh, my predecessors did, and even though it had its ups and downs, it gave us the opportunity to do something really interesting with the equity from that farm. And so I really see myself as the caretaker of that equity. I've tried to certainly preserve it, but also grow it to the extent that I'm able. So that's. I mean, we were talking earlier about meaning. I guess that is something I do find some meaning in the sense that I'm not reducing this asset, but hopefully growing it, and then my kids, my sister's kids, will benefit from it, and we'll see what they do. It's
Great.
You never can tell.
That's beautiful. And also, it's a way for you to connect with prior generations and show respect for them,
That's
because
true.
you talked about the first generation who like inherited and I guess had closer relationships. And I was thinking maybe you brought the point of like when the families grow, then the relationships are you're not communicating with us as much, so there's not that same tie.
Yeah,
But I was thinking
that's
also as
true.
they grew up during the Depression and they all remembered what extreme poverty could be like or struggling was. And so they
Yeah,
probably look at this say, hey, this is an asset that produces and we need to do what it takes to make sure this thing makes it to the next generation and consistently helps them too. So
that's exactly
yeah.
right, Jordan. That's a key point because these people sacrificed in order to keep these assets, or those assets that got kept, because
Mhm.
a lot of assets didn't. Um, they could have sold them in 1932, and used the money for whatever, so that my dad could finish college, for example, which he didn't, because they ran out of money for that purpose. So the fact that they kept these assets, to me shows, okay, they cared about them. They wanted to pass something on, and so I'd like to at least do the same. Maybe it's not as romantic as a big farm, but it's still interesting. Who knows? If I wanted to get back into the ag business, I could, but I don't think it's a very attractive business.
Well, so long as I can drive one of the tractors. one of my
Right?
one of my goals is there's a show on Discovery Channel called Gold Rush, and it shows people who are mining gold all the time. And if I made it well, I would like to get my own claim so I could just mine gold. I wouldn't make any money, but just the fact of being able to mine gold is something that I always find interesting. So what I
Yeah.
want to do here is, I mean, this has been a fantastic conversation, so thank you so much. I want to get into the information sources part of our conversation. So,
Okay.
what is one book you have read that has made you a better investor?
I was giving this some thought, and Yeah, I've read a lot of books on investing, and that they've all helped in a lot of ways. There are two books that I read early on that made a big impression on me. And so these aren't necessarily, I'm not saying these are the best books, but they're really good books, and they helped me a lot to uh, kind of frame the process of, in this case, stock investing, because I really paid a lot more attention to stock investing early on. Uh, One is a classic, and I actually got a copy of this from my father. It's called The Battle for Investment Survival by a guy named Gerald Lieb, or Loeb, Loeb. I say Lieb because we had a neighbor, and that's how he pronounced it, but most people would say Loeb, Loeb. Um, anyway, Battle for Investment Survival. Uh, he was like a key guy in E.F. Hutton for decades, um, and wrote a newsletter that was apparently very popular in my parents' generation. And it's just a great book. It talks about investment strategies, and it just is an easy read and very interesting. Um, because of the time it was written, so it was written in, I think it was published in the 1950s. Uh, he could look back on all the risks of the early 20th century that people had had to deal with. And so war, depression, and it's a very interesting perspective, because when he talks about risk, he'll talk about things like, well, you know, you could have friends in other countries so that, if you have to evacuate, you have some place to go. Yeah, these are the these are the kinds of things
Right.
that he addresses. Not that that's the main thing,
You're right.
it's a broad spectrum approach to risk. The other is maybe surprising, because it's a book that a lot of people scoff at, but that's How to Make Money in Stocks by Bill O'Neill. Um, How to Make Money in Stocks. I think people criticize it because it has kind of a simplistic, formulaic approach, but it made a big impression on me because it actually includes some uh, very good notions of fundamental analysis, uh, and how to look at also some technical aspects without getting too complicated. Things like relative strength, and how a stock is doing compared to the rest of the market. What its earnings have been, and what its earnings growth rate is, things like this. And a lot of emphasis on comparisons. Um, I think, his investing approach isn't exactly my cup of tea, but understanding it is very helpful.
Mhm.
And he makes it very easy to grasp a lot of these principles, which O'Neill didn't invent. I mean, these are principles of investing that go back a long ways. But that was a very good book. I liked it. I
Excellent.
could, I don't know, I could probably pull some other things off the shelf here,
Well,
uh, but it would take a while.
yeah, I could do the same too. It would probably collapse on me. What's one book you've read that's made you a better thinker? For instance, a book that helped you think clearer, provide you with tools to help conquer your mind.
Um, yeah, I like Taleb's books about randomness, and the Black Swan book, for example. Uh, it really helped me start thinking about behavioral biases, uh, and our notion of risk. And for example, in the Black Swan book, one of the things that comes out is the things that we think are very, very remote and unlikely to happen a lot more often than we think they do.
Hmm.
And you need to take those into account. Actually, this goes back to some of the things in the Battle for Investment Survival, where you really, really think about risk, and it uh, this idea that you don't necessarily want to throw all your money into your investments. You may want to keep a substantial cushion, or you may only want to get heavily invested when you see a really good idea, and then you want to seize upon it. That was one of Lieb's ideas. He had this notion that he formulated kind of late in his career called the ever liquid portfolio. Now, I don't follow this, but his idea was that you kept really a huge amount of the portfolio in cash until you saw something that you thought was an outstanding opportunity, and then you went maybe 100% or at least a really significant position. And his idea was that liquidity was your protection, and then you bet heavily on things that had an outstanding chance of profiting heavily.
Right.
That was an interesting approach.
I remember when the financial crisis hit and Citigroup was trading at like $1 a share, and my dad was like getting every dollar he get his hands on and was putting thousands of dollars into that company. And I remember him sitting down and was looking at me. He's like, Jordan, you majored in political science. You know how corrupt the system is, lobbyists. There's no way they're going to let Citibank fail. And he was right. He made a lot of money off that trade. But there's always an aspect of, do you have the fortitude to say, okay, the herd's going this way, can I go the opposite way?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And okay, so that's a great example, because you could also make the same argument about Washington Mutual and say it's a bargain at $4 a share. And it just shows, okay, it is a good strategy. It is a good strategy, but you also have to hedge your bets. And what happens if it goes south, or make multiple bets?
Right.
If you'd done Citigroup, Washington Mutual, and 3 or 4 others at that time, even if 2 of them had failed, if the others succeeded spectacularly, you'd do well.
Right.
And that's kind of I don't know if that's exactly the kind of black swan thing that Taleb talks about, but it's definitely consideration. The idea that you can make money off the unlikely events. Well, that's part of what he says, right. Anyway.
Yeah,
I don't know. Another book that made a big impression on me was The Millionaire Next Door.
Okay.
And it's a classic book. It basically talks about expense control and living a modest lifestyle and not spending all your money. And it shows how just pretty ordinary people, everyday people, may have a lot of money, but they got there by just not spending a lot and not flaunting it. You don't always have to have a new car. You don't have to wear a Rolex. Nothing against Rolexes, but if you keep your expenses down, then your income suddenly looks a lot bigger, right? So that's the other side of growing your income, is if you can reduce your expenses. And I know this is well understood, but I think people sometimes lose sight of that, and that book helped to crystallize it for me.
Right. It's well understood, but not practiced, right? You can tell it to a lot of people, oh yeah, I get it, and they're still wasting their money. So I always try to tell people, it's like, no, trying to live a lifestyle like a monk is probably not going to work well for you, but also trying to spend every dollar that comes in is going to lead to collapse. So figure out things that you really enjoy that you want to splurge on, but then figure out other things. Is this just conspicuous consumption where you're just trying to keep up with the Joneses, and try to cut that out with no full stop. Get it, cut as much of that out as possible.
That's exactly right.
Let's go to the last book. What is one book you have read that has made you a better person? For instance, a book that has provided you with a new way to look at the world, helped you see things differently in your life, or taught you about a certain aspect of history.
Yeah, we're kind of the product of every book we've ever read, so it's really hard to answer that. It may seem trite. I would have to. I'd be lying if I didn't include in that list the Bible. I'm not I'm no longer a very religious person, but there's a lot in that book, and there's a lot that you can take away from it that's valuable. So that's certainly one. Another one, definitely quite a different book, but it made a big impression on me, and that's Winston Churchill's history of World War II in about 5 big volumes. And just the idea that here's a first-person account by one of the key players of what happened. I don't know why it made such a big impression on me. I like the fact that here was somebody who was in a position to actually know what he was thinking at a given time, and it wasn't somebody else saying, "Well, this is what Churchill was thinking," or so and so was thinking, because he's relaying, "Oh, I had this conversation with FDR," or had so and so,
like nonchalantly,
and
right?
yeah, and just all kinds of things. And of course, Churchill's a fascinating writer. He's a prolific writer. He's written a zillion books. These are just some of them. And I don't know why it popped into my head when I was thinking of your question, but you mentioned a certain aspect of history, and I think for that reason it kind of triggered it. I found it a fascinating book, and I've always wanted to read more of his work. So I don't know. I could go on and on about. I love history,
Yeah.
so really anything about history I enjoy.
No, it's fantastic. There's a book on the history of financial euphoria where they talk about every bubble since like the 1500s. And
Well,
and the author talks about, we always try to find a scapegoat. We try to say it's the bankers, it's this one crook, it's the government, blah, blah, blah. But we don't look at ourselves and say, hey, we're all part of that bubble. And so the book lets you look at yourself more introspectively and say, hey, what can I do to contain those tendencies that lead to financial demise and ruin?
that's very true. That's a good one. And of course, it probably. I think the first book along that line is the famous "The Madness of
Mm-hmm.
Crowds," and it has a second part to the title, which I've forgotten, but which I believe was written in the 1800s. But that's another outstanding book. Made a big impression on me.
Yeah.
Do I think I could avoid being in a bubble? Maybe I'll have to read this other one that you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's definitely easy to get swept up. I think that's actually a really, really good point to bring up. I kind of wish I'd said more about that myself, just how I don't think I'm very good at it, honestly, yet. How can I avoid being swept up in the crowd? Um,
I don't think none of us are, but I also think it's a feature of humanity because our ability to say what made us the dominant species here was we could all collectively say, okay, so we're going this direction. Let's all just fall in line and do it because it's good for the herd or whatnot.
yeah,
And then in our modern day society, for an investor, you have to be able to turn that button off. And
yeah, you really do.
it's really tough. And I think just the best you can do is just recognizing that you have that button. And that at least makes
I
you
think
say, good.
no.
Yeah.
Please continue. Finish your
Well,
thought,
I
and
was going to say
I'll
that at
jump in.
least makes you say, okay, let's take one step back. Let's look at why I'm thinking about this and why I'm trying to do this.
Oh,
And are these really my thoughts, or are these other thoughts that have been implanted in my mind by someone else? And a good way to test that is go talk to your friends or colleagues and kind of ask them, like, not directly, but kind of put it in there, like, oh, so what are your goals, or what are you trying to aim for? And they'll start talking about their goals, but you'll soon find yourself saying, why am I not thinking about doing that too? And why am I not pressing for promotion as much? And why am I not investing in Hawaii?
uh,
And it's just very
yeah.
interesting how goals, you can just be infected by other people's goals too. So,
That's really true.
yeah.
And of course, some of that is exchanging, good ideas,
Mm-hmm.
like me realizing from my friend, oh, I can give after-tax money to my 401k and roll it into a Roth. There's something I learned from a friend. But I think one of the worst offenders here is financial TV. And I think a simple piece of advice is just don't watch any financial TV. It's basically um, going to infect your mind with what other people are doing. I find it much easier to read about things, so you get some distance. Podcasts are kind of in between. I listen to a lot of podcasts, not as many as I used to because I don't commute, and I used to listen during the commute. But yeah, TV. I honestly just say no. TV is fine, but as far as financial TV, I'm opposed to it. That's my personal crusade.
It's junk food. So I definitely hear you. So,
Yeah.
well, Chip, thank you so much for this interview. This has been
Thanks, Jordan.
fantastic. This is awesome, and I look forward to actually want to have you back on here again to talk about stocks. And we
Yeah,
can.
this has been really fun.
Mhm.
I'd love to do another one of these.
Fantastic. Hey investors, I hope you enjoyed this investors therapy session. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and we'd really appreciate it if you could share it with your friends. Finally, make sure to visit svinvestorsclub.com. There you will find tons of great investor content, and if you're a current or former tech employee, you can join our private community dedicated to helping tech employees become better investors. All of this is free, so make sure to take advantage of it. Have a great day. See you next time.